Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is Scott Wolter. Before I bring him on, I have to thank CuriosityStream. They're the award-winning destination for documentary series and features covering every topic from space exploration to adventure. Satisfy your thirst for knowledge anytime and anywhere with CuriosityStream. Their subscriptions start at only $2.99 a month. Just click the link in the description to sign up today. And please subscribe to Forbidden Knowledge News on lbry.com. That is our official backup channel. We also have a brand new channel and platform on Rokfin. Our channel is called Beyond Classified. Go to Rokfin to check that out. That link is also in the description. It contains all the stuff that you will no longer be able to see here on YouTube. And Forbidden Knowledge News is always available on all your popular podcast platforms. Tonight I want to welcome Scott Wolter. He is an author, forensic geologist, and television host, best known as the host of the series America Unearthed. Based in Minnesota, he is the founder and president of the American Petrographic Services and the inventor of Archaeopetrography. Scott, welcome. How you doing tonight?
Well, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. I know tonight we're going to be talking about some cool stuff, but just for the record, today is what happened in Washington, D.C. when, some, I don't want to call them protesters, that was more rioters, attacked the Capitol. I was profoundly impacted by that and disappointed. And as an American, Russia, China, and our enemies are laughing at us right now. And I hope that our leaders really take stock in what happened and show us the leadership I know that we all can do when we come together. And I'm really hopeful for that. And I think we'll rise to the challenge. But this has been a tough day for the U.S., whether people realize it or not. And I'm sad, but I'm also optimistic. So we'll see how things go. But I just felt like I had to say something.
Yeah, I'm also optimistic. It's been the craziest year ever. And I hope that this coming year we will have some good things to look forward to instead. But tonight I'm looking forward to, we have so many directions we could go. Not only do I want to talk about, some various out-of-place artifacts, a little bit about the Templars, but also you've recently obtained some information from an individual in the Department of Defense about the ET phenomenon, which is going to be fun. Yeah. But this is your first time on. I'd love to hear what got you started and interested in geology and petroglyphs and the work that you've done.
Okay. Well, my interest in geology started when I was graduating from high school. I took a trip out to Montana with my brother and another friend, and we went hiking up in the Bridger Mountains, and we ended up getting to the top of this peak. And I was watching the sun go down. It was just one of those picturesque moments. And there was a tube where you could, unscrew the top, pull out a ledger, and you could sign your name and date on it. And as I was unscrewing this thing, I looked down and I saw a rock, and there was a little bivalve, a clamshell. And I looked at that and I thought to myself, how the hell did this shell that was at one time at the bottom of an ocean, end up at the top of this mountain? And I was just so intrigued and fascinated by that it really sparked an interest in geology. So I went to University of Minnesota, Duluth, graduated in 82 in geology and earth science, and started working for a testing firm, and eventually started American Petrographic Services in January of 1990. God, that's 31 years ago now. My gosh, time flies. Where we started a laboratory where we do basically material forensics, but basically what we really do is autopsies on concrete and rock. And in July of 2000, the Kensington runestone came into my laboratory, and I'll never forget the guy who was representing the museum, and he was talking to me, and I could tell he was an advocate for authenticity. And I said, look, dude, I said, I'll be happy to do this work for you, but you need to be prepared that I may come back and give you news you're not going to like, and you're still going to pay me because the beautiful thing is it doesn't matter what the results are. I get paid either way. So he was good with that and away we went. But I will tell you, I never heard of the Kensington runestone. I didn't know what he was talking about, but it really didn't matter whether I did or not, because the facts carry the day. And anyway, so we did the analysis, and I ended up doing a weathering study where I compared the weathering of the inscription on the runestone with the weathering of tombstones of similar geology, exact same minerals, virtually identical weathering environment, at above and below grade. I mean, tombstones were perfect, right? And I ended up concluding that the age of the weathering was older than 200 years, and that was from the date it was pulled out of the ground, because it hasn't been in a weathering environment since, which absolutely proved that it couldn't be a late 19th century hoax, as everybody claimed. And if it's not that, you really have only one other option, and that is that it's genuine. Now, I had no idea about sacred paradigms and secret history, and this is the narrative and that's it. There are no narratives in science. And so I released my results, and people at first, were questioning, and I don't have any problem if somebody has a question, and, I'm certainly not above making a mistake. And if I made a mistake, point it out to me and I'll fix it. Well, that wasn't the issue. They just didn't like the result. Well, tough hop, right? And so, at first it was a little testy, and then it got nasty. And, I got to tell you, man, I went to UMD on a football scholarship, and I played linebacker. I don't back down to anybody, especially when it comes to the science and to the facts. And my conclusion, I stood by it because I trust rocks. I don't trust some people. Rocks have never lied to me. Rocks don't have egos. They don't have agendas. They just are. So I always trusted what the rock told me. And I heard what people had to say, but, my foundation was the rock. And that led to going over to Sweden five times and finding all the language, runes, dialect, grammar, dating features that all the experts said didn't exist. Well, logic demands, if this thing is real, the rock says it's real, therefore these things must be so. And they were. I found them all. Of course, all that did was just piss everybody off even more. And, that's how I got started on this. But the next phase was, if this is an authentic artifact, what that means is somebody carved it. They came from some place, and they came here for some reason. Absolutely, those things are universal truths, right? And then I set out to find those things. And quite frankly, the evidence that led to the medieval Templars was one of the easiest evidence trails I've ever followed. And it went to them and nobody else but them. And of course, I was criticized. Oh, the Templars, of course, isn't that convenient? I go, it's not convenient. It's the truth. And get used to it. And so the deeper I dove and the more questions we asked, and believe me, I didn't do this on my own. I had a lot of help from many different people. And I listened to them and they helped. And eventually we figured out it was the Templars who, brought the treasures from the Middle East and Europe, brought them over here and placed them in the knowledge that in the future, the brethren, if you will, the ideological descendants of the Templars, who are Freemasons and our founding fathers, took on that obligation, and they finished the job of establishing what they called a sanctuary, the New Jerusalem, if you will, where they could live in freedom from the tyranny of the monarchs of Europe, freedom from the persecution of the Roman Catholic Church, and pursue life, liberty, and happiness. So that's the story. And to me, it's patently obvious. I think, what's happening now, in our government is really sad from the standpoint of people are talking about the Constitution. But I wonder how many of them understand that the Constitution is a Masonic document. There's no question about that, okay? And our founding fathers who wrote that, George Mason was the author of the Constitution, really. They give credit to Thomas Jefferson, but George Mason wrote the Constitution of Virginia, and Jefferson basically used that as the template. But right now we're being tested, and we're being tested from within. And I think now more than ever, this story of the Templars, the Runestone, the Newport Tower, all these other artifacts that have been screaming to be heard for a long time, need to be heard. And we need to understand where we came from so we don't fall into the same mess that happened, if we don't do our due diligence. People forget. We fought a revolution against a monarchy. Remember that? The Revolutionary War? Do we remember that? And remember who persecuted the Templars? The Roman Church, right? And the church and the crown legitimized each other to create a terrible force that the people suffered. And we're going down that path again. So maybe what happened today is a wake-up call, and maybe if people understood the truth behind these artifacts, the history behind these artifacts, that is our country's history, maybe we can figure out a way to come together and go forward into the future. That old saying, Chris, those who do not learn from the past are destined to repeat it. And let's not fall into that trap. We're smarter than that. We're better than that.
Definitely, I agree 100%. And you mentioned the Kensington Runestone. I think that's a kind of good place to start. I'd like to get into.
Hold on one sec. Can I get off my soapbox first? Okay, let's go.
So first, let's get into what the mainstream narrative was, and then what your discoveries brought to the table when it comes to this, the Kensington Runestone.
Sure. Well, the mainstream narrative is the Runestone's a hoax, right? Olaf Ullman carved it. He did it as a prank. It's such a ridiculous premise. It really doesn't deserve the dignity of even talking about, because first of all, there is no evidence to support. Olaf Ullman could not have possibly carved that inscription based on what we know now. Nobody walking the planet in 1898 could have carved the Kensington Runestone inscription. It's just not possible. He had no motive. He had no objective. He suffered, and his family suffered terribly. And all he did was find a stone, and the only thing he's guilty of is wanting to know what he found. So, here's another thing about material forensics. It's important for people to understand, and it will make sense if you think about it, but it's not something that's intuitive right off the bat. And that is all the facts and evidence in multiple disciplines: geology, language, history, symbolism, all these different aspects of the investigation and all the facts within them all support authenticity. 100%. It's really one of the easiest problems I've ever solved, right? So if you have all this evidence that supports authenticity, how can there possibly be evidence to support the contrary? Think about that. It can't exist. If it's authentic, how can there be any evidence to support the fact that it's not true? There isn't any, and there never was any. So I challenge anybody to give me a fact that supports that it's not authentic. There isn't one. And so, and so that's just the way it is. Now, why don't they want it to be real, right? Why do we have a certain narrative that if something gets in the way of that, it's dismissed? Well, it's the age-old thing: money, power, and control, right? And the fact of the matter is, if you accept the Kensington runestone as being an authentic artifact. Look, rewrite the books. People say, well, gee, you have to rewrite history. Well, then rewrite it, right? Sell more books. There's opportunities for scholars to make all kinds of contributions. What's the friggin' problem? Well, the problem is there are certain powers that be that I just mentioned, namely the Roman Catholic Church, that has a lot to lose if the Kensington runestone is authentic, because what happens is you trigger a series of dominoes that begin to fall, and they go to very inconvenient places. Like, for example, the Talpiot tomb in Jerusalem that I am convinced contains 10 ossuaries that hold the mortal remains of Jesus, his wife Mary Magdalene, and other members of the first century royal family. Now, how can you have the bones of somebody who supposedly was the Son of God that rose and went to heaven, right? That's a problem. And that's exactly one of the places where those dominoes go. And I think the implications are self-evident.
And the larger part of the story is, of course, that the Templars were, I guess, charged with, being in charge of these artifacts, and they also were the founders of our country through Freemasonry, and that's one of the things that we're not told through our history books, mainstream narrative. We're never told.
And why is that?
Just like what you just mentioned, the power, the greed, the narrative. They don't want to rewrite history because that's what they basically have to do.
Well, it changes the whole dynamic. And, I don't mean to continue to beat on the church, but I hate to tell you, they're the ones that are the biggest antagonists in this story. They're the ones that funds the institution, like the Smithsonian Institution. And money, follow the money, as they say. It's a tragic story. And there's a lot more to this, but look, the Templars had one over on the church back in medieval times. It's part of the reason they were able to rise and be so successful. There were two things that really people don't understand about the Templars. One is the leadership of the Templars, and the true ideology of the Templars had nothing to do with Catholicism. They just pretended to be Catholic, right? My enemy, keep your friends close, your enemies closer. And all the symbolism and the iconography of the Roman Catholic Church was borrowed from things that were much older. I mean, just look at the Egyptian culture, right? And so these symbols to the Templars, who were part of dynastic families that go back generations and hundreds and thousands of years through Egypt and beyond, they knew what these symbols meant. And they venerated the Virgin Mary, who was emblematic of the great goddess to them. So they were perfectly fine. Now, their veneration of the Virgin actually got a little bit, too heavy for the church. And, they didn't quite understand. But when you understand the true ideology, it all makes sense. The other thing that was problematic is that the Templars had the evidence. They had the marriage document of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and they knew the truth about the fact he was not divine. He was just a dude like the rest of us, right? Now, the whole fundamental basis of the ideology of the Roman Church is that he was divine. So if you hold evidence to prove that he was not divine, you sure have a pretty powerful weapon against, this institution, which was the church. And the church knew it. So this is part of the reason why the Templars were able to be so successful, because they had the blessing of the church, because they had them by the you-know-what. But eventually, at the start of the 14th century, they got the right pope in place. They had a maniac king of France who was ready to take them on. And quite frankly, the Templars had gotten a little fat and lazy by this time, and they were vulnerable. And so it was a combination of things that led to their downfall. But they didn't go away. A lot of people don't really understand the history of what happened. I mean, you had, tens of thousands of Templar Knights that were supported by probably hundreds of thousands of, well, not hundreds of thousands, but many tens of thousands of people that supported a Templar Knight. You probably had anywhere from 10 to 20 people that supported one knight and his horses that fought in battle. So it's a lot more complicated than people think, but the only place that the order was physically suppressed was in France. You had Templars in many different countries, into the Middle East, into Scandinavia, the British Isles, the Iberian Peninsula. They weren't all in France. Now, that was where their headquarters was, but believe me, the institution didn't end in 1307 or 1314 when De Molay was burned. They just continued on under the radar. But the whole plan from the very beginning was to establish, the sanctuary over in North America. That was always the plan. That this has always been the place where people that were being persecuted long before the Templars came around, their family ancestors, literal ancestors, and they knew that the sanctuary that they could escape to was North America and South America and Central America. So this BS about Columbus is beyond laughable. And, if people want to know the truth, this is the truth right here.
Now, I want to get into Freemasonry a little bit. You're
Sure.
a Freemason, and
I am.
I believe that the Catholic Church personally demonized Freemasonry a lot, and I think that's a good reason why we have a lot of these conspiracies these days that surround Freemasonry, about how it's evil and things like that. Would you agree that it would be because the Catholic Church that we have the view that most modern people have of Freemasonry today, that it's some sort of evil secret society that runs the world?
Well, if we're running the world, I'm a little bit disappointed. Okay, I didn't get the memo there, and so I don't. I understand. Anytime you have an organization that is secret, right? People that are not part of it are going to question it, criticize it, attack it. And it's just I think a human thing that people fear the unknown, right? And I can tell you that Freemasonry, like everything, has evolved over time, right? And you go back to the time of our founding fathers, secrecy was a matter of life and death, right? I mean, if you did not keep a secret about what we were doing, in our fight against the British, you were dead, right? If you were considered a spy. So back then, the whole element of secrecy and handshakes and signs of recognition was part of espionage, right? It was part of your mission to, win the war. And even going forward, the Civil War, same thing. When we start getting into the more modern era, though, we still have a lot of Freemasonry was more popular than ever in the late 1800s, early 1900s. After the Second World War, a lot of the guys that fought missed that fraternal brotherhood aspect of being in war, right? And so Freemasonry exploded after that. But, as time has gone on, things are different. The world has changed. But the thing is that young people are still asking those big questions in life. Is there a God? What happens after I die? All that kind of stuff. But they're not getting those answers in church as much as they used to. People are moving away from the church because in many ways it's unhealthy to have an institution that is run by human beings, giving people those answers. A lot of those answers should come from within. But, one of the things about the church that I think that irritates them about Freemasonry is we don't care if you're a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, a Buddhist. Native Americans take their obligation on an eagle feather. The point is We do ask people to make a statement in a belief in a higher power. Who that higher power is, what you call it, we don't care, because we're all talking about the same thing, right? And that's really nobody's business but your own. And so this is part of what makes the church uncomfortable. So of course they demonize it by saying things that just aren't true. And we do take obligations to protect our brothers, to protect our family, to protect our country, to we do a lot of charity work. We donate a lot of money to many different causes, and our record speaks for itself. And really the only secrets that we can't talk about are the passwords, the penal signs, and the handshakes, right? But if you want to know what they are, just go online, you can get it all there, right? So what secrets do we have? In this day and age, really the secrets we have are the secrets that, that a brother might share with me and I might do with somebody else. But it is a worldwide organization. And I can tell you that, like anything else, I mean, if you fought in a war, or if you played on a sports team, or if you're part of the fraternity, you meet somebody that was on your team, you guys are already up here, right? You don't have to start down here. You guys have already shared a common experience. It's the same thing. And, you've been in battle, right? I played a lot of football, man. It gets pretty rough, and you got to have each other's back if you want to be successful. And same thing in war. But it's not quite the same, but it's very similar. And it's nothing to fear. It's also a place to learn. We use the code word light. Light means knowledge. And we seek to bring light. We teach people. My job, my primary job, I guess you would say, within Freemasonry, is I'm an educator. I'm a researcher, and I give lots of lectures. LEO is the Lodge Education Officer, and I'm asked oftentimes to go in and give 15 minutes to a half-hour speech at a lodge meeting, or at Grand Lodge or whatever. And I take great pride in that, because these guys, they're there because they want to learn. So I don't know what's wrong with that.
Now, you mentioned earlier that this is not a Christian nation. This was not founded as a Christian nation. It was founded as a Masonic nation, and the Constitution is actually a Masonic document. And that's something else that most people do not realize. And also, I think it was 53 of the 56 signers were Masons, right?
We're Master Masons, yeah. That's right. And, the whole... it's really troubling, because, I hear a lot of talk about, evangelicals. That's fine. If you want to be an evangelical, that's your right. But don't make the mistake of thinking just because we have more Christians in this country than any other religion means that we are a Christian country. It's very, very important that people realize that we are not a Christian nation. And one of the main reasons for that is tolerance, right? You need to be tolerant, that just because you have the dominant view doesn't mean it's the only view. And quite frankly, one of the things that I like about meeting people from other countries, other religions, other cultures, is I know what goes on in my world, right? Here in the United States, at least here in Minnesota where I live, I don't learn anything new very often about my place. When I go to another country, I go to a different part of the country, I meet people of different ethnicities, different races. I learn from them, and they learn from me. And, I'm better off. I'm a better person by, learning about somebody else and teaching them about what I know. So those are some of the ideals upon which this nation was founded. And, we need more tolerance. We need more people listening instead of telling us what they think all the time, right? You know what I'm saying.
I do. And something else interesting I've heard you mention is that some of the Native Americans had their own secret societies like the Templars and actually were kind of like their brethren, and worked
Not
together at
kind of,
times.
not kind
They
of,
were.
absolutely.
Yeah,
um,
talk a little bit about that.
yeah, okay. Well, the secret society is called the Medewin, and it's still alive and well today. I know several indigenous people who are Meday, and it's Freemasonry from the from a native perspective. They don't call it Freemasonry, but it's essentially the same thing. The rituals are very much the same. The traditions, I mean, a lot of the details that I have learned, I'm like, oh, I know what that is. Oh yeah, that sounds familiar. Um, and the other thing when you go into lodge, when you meet as a Mason, um, it's something that we take a lot of pride in, and um, so we go there and we honor our brothers, we pay respects, we listen, and um, it's the same thing that the Meday do. And so when the Templars came over here practicing, which was essentially Freemasonry, I use the analogy that you know the Templars, when they carved the Kensington runestone in the middle of the continent, they didn't fight their way to Kensington, right? There's no way at that time, the natives were going to let them get there unless they had some type of an understanding, okay? I don't know why. I feel like I'm the first person that has ever even thought about this. Never have I ever seen anyone talk about the native perspective in this question, which is patently obvious. There has to have been interaction with these people. What was that interaction? Well, it turns out because they shared this common bond of brotherhood. I mean, I was in a Meday sweat a number of years ago, and I wanted to ask, the medicine man about the Templars, but I had to earn the right to ask my questions, and I had to go through a certain ritual. It was beautiful. And then, go ahead, Scott, ask your questions. And I said, well, I want to ask you about the Templars. And he said, you mean our blood brothers? And that was all I needed to hear, really, because I knew then that what I surmised had to be the case for them to be able to operate, not just get to Minnesota, but all across the continent, because they were all across the continent. There had to be a relationship with the indigenous people. And, they're not any different than any other group of people, right? Treat them with respect, treat people the way that you want to be treated, and you get it back, right? And that's how you build trust and a relationship. And so by meeting in lodge and sharing these rituals and eventually intermarrying and assimilating, that's how the Templars were able to be so successful over here. And, that's the elephant in the room that I've never heard anyone really talk about.
Yeah, especially now. I mean, you don't hear any mainstream talk of any of the Templars or Freemason history. It's all independent media. It's all independent journalists. Like people like yourself that are unearthing these things and coming out and talking about them. But do you think that mainstream media, if more and more people like yourself keep coming out with this, and they're not going to be able to deny it anymore, history books will eventually have to be rewritten? Or do you think they're just going to keep pushing the same narrative as long as they can until, I don't know.
Well, I think, look, I'm a big believer in an old adage that the truth eventually will bubble to the surface, right? You can only keep it down for so long. And look, the facts are going to carry the day. And what's really surprising to me is how many really smart people are happy to take advantage of all the benefits and luxuries and conveniences of science and technology like this, right? And like this, what we're doing right now. But then on the other hand, they will completely throw out logic and science and facts to argue, their ideological viewpoint about certain things, like, Columbus, or no, the Templars couldn't have come here because I don't like that idea. And the church doesn't like that idea. I mean, you can suppress it for so long and eventually it's got to come out. Now, having said that, you have corrupt institutions that are funded by the church, like Wikipedia. And I will give you an example. And this isn't bragging, it's a simple fact. I have done more work on the Kensington runestone, on all aspects of the runestone, more than anyone in the history of the artifact since it was found. And I'm not saying that to brag, it just is what it is, okay? And I think I've done some pretty good work. If you Google Kensington runestone, you will not see my name. You will not see any of the 4 books I published that were all or partly about the Kensington runestone. But one book that you will see, check this out. Is this book right here. It's called The Kensington Runestone, Approaching a Research Question Holistically, written by Alice Beck Kehoe, a retired professor of archaeology from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. I published a 574-page book with a linguist who is also a scientist, Dick Nielsen. He passed away a few years ago. And that is the Bible on the Kensington runestone. This book is about that book. And she said that we solved the Kensington runestone. But the book she's writing about is not on the wiki site, but this is. Now, you tell me if that's not effed up, okay?
Yeah.
So, is it going to change? I hope so. I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime, unfortunately. But as I said, I stand behind all the work I've done. I stand behind everything I've said. And I know that in the future, it'll all be accepted. It has to, because it's the truth.
Now, sticking to kind of out of place and interesting artifacts, you recently did some work with the Mystery Stones of Texas.
Yeah.
For those that are not familiar, could you tell us a little bit about what those are and, some of the conclusions you've come up with?
Yeah. Well, that's still really an open investigation, but I think we're getting to the bottom of that well a little bit. I actually need to write that up, but I've been so busy with other stuff, I haven't had a chance. And I really want to do some more lab work on these stones. But basically, it was a year ago in February, next month, that I first learned about these artifacts. I was at a conference and somebody had mentioned these artifacts, and he showed me a couple of pictures, and I said, I got to see these. So what I did was I went down to Texas a couple of times to look at these artifacts. And what they are is they're carved on sandstone, and some of them are like this big. Some of them are, one of them is about 4.5 feet long. But they were found inside of a cave along a little stream next to an old Spanish mission in central Texas. And they were found, I think there was a date that was carved on the rock outside, but that was dated 1501. And a guy saw that in 1968, but then he didn't really go over there and investigate it fully until the year 2000. And in 2004, they discovered a cave that had been sealed up, and these carved slabs had been piled up. Like blocks, like slabs of rock on top of each other. And they were covered with these strange carvings with multiple languages, strange iconography, archangels. Some of them were maps that they think were treasure maps. There's just this eclectic collection of, uh, of carvings and iconography and, like I said, languages. And they're definitely weathered. We don't know how long that they were put in the cave, but here's the thesis that we're going on is we know that in the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal, that in the starting in the late 15th century, 16th century, 17th century, oh, well, right up to today. It's not the same as it was, but the church demanded that people be Catholic, right? Well, you had people who were Jewish that are what they called crypto Jews. They were outwardly Catholic, but inwardly Jewish, right? They pretended to be Catholic, but they were really Jews. And so what happened is in the late 15th century, many of these people were under persecution from the Roman Catholic Church. And so the church actually came out with an inquisition on the day that Columbus set sail on his first voyage. Now, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that Columbus himself was a crypto Jew. And many of these people were given a choice. You can either convert forever, you can leave, or we'll kill you. What do you think? Well, I think a lot of these people said, I think I'm going to leave. So a lot of them probably went with Columbus. Many of them came on other voyages subsequent to that, all the way through to the into the 1700s. And we know that we have these missions that were established in northern Mexico along the Gulf Coast and into what is now southern Texas. But this location isn't anywhere near the coast. It's quite a ways inland. And the question remains, now, could this have been a group of these crypto Jews? And if so, why do we have different language? We have Hebrew there, but the language is actually what they call Ladino, which is Hebrew and Spanish, kind of a mixture of Hebrew and Spanish, not Latino, Ladino. And the iconography on these is just so varied. I mean, some of them have beautiful Egyptian iconography of Anubis and Isis. And, what is this stuff doing here? Well, in fact, back at that time, Egyptian stuff was all the rage, right? So, and
what time period was these? Were these?
Well, we've got dates on some of these that go from 1501, 1506, 1507, 1513, 1537, all the way into the mid 18th century, 1765, I think is the most recent date. So you've got a period of, about 250 years that we think that this colony and subsequent generations were occupying this area. And I think most of these stones were probably grave slabs. That's why they're weathered, right? And so what happened is something happened. And what I think it was is they caught wind that the church was coming. The Spanish were coming, the church was coming with them. And these people who were openly practicing Judaism and who knows what else, they got rid of these stones, which would have provided, a problem for them if the church had seen these grave slabs and the symbols and the language and the phrases that are on them. So we think something happened, and that's why they put them in these caves. Now, we don't know that for sure, but that seems to be reasonable speculation. But like I said, we have a lot more work to do on them. It's a fascinating story that isn't a pre-Columbian story. It actually may involve Columbus, which is kind of cool in itself.
Definitely, yeah. And what other type of, work do you have to do to get more information from these?
Well, the inscriptions are really difficult to decipher because if it was just straight Hebrew, that would be one thing. There, on many of them, I'd say probably 7 or 8 of them, they're using Hebrew letters. They're using the Hebrew alphabet, but the language is not Hebrew. It's this sort of mixture, right? And It was somebody who understood the Hebrew alphabet pretty well, but not really well, and spoke this, this sort of Hebrew Spanish dialect that we see. So it makes it really difficult to translate. I can't translate it because I don't speak Spanish or Hebrew, other than a couple of words. But where do you find those experts? There aren't many people that can help us with that. But we do have a couple of academics that we're going to reach out to, and we'll see what we find out.
Very cool. I'll be very interested in seeing what comes out of that. Now,
Yeah.
for the last half of the show, very excited to talk about this. You have been contacted from someone who claimed they were in the Department of Defense and has
He
given
didn't
you.
claim, well, he claimed he was, and I am now convinced that he is. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And he's given
Yeah.
you some, let's say, intriguing information.
Yeah.
I'll go
Yeah.
as far as to say that.
Well, yeah. No, it's yeah. This came from left field when he contacted me, but um, I'm also kind of proud of the fact that one of the reasons he contacted me is he felt that I was a credible person, that I was somebody who stood behind what I said, um, and I do stand behind what I say if I believe that I have got the evidence to back up what I say, and if I don't know, I'll say so. And if I think it's a hoax, I will. I've done that many times. Not everything I see is real. And quite frankly, if you'd asked me 5 or 6 years ago about extraterrestrials, and I would have said thanks, but no thanks. It really isn't my cup of tea, and it is a little bit outside of the realm of my normal, subject matter that I investigate. However, having said that, the process of investigation, regardless if you're looking at a rune stone, you're looking at a murder case, you're looking at a piece of concrete, or you're investigating extraterrestrials, the process of investigation is the same. It doesn't really matter. So I understand the process of investigation. It's all I've done since I graduated from college is forensic investigation. So I need to see some facts. I need to see some evidence, and I have seen some of that evidence. And really, one of the main reasons why the government is taking a different approach is because this tight secrecy for the sake of saving humans from panicking and running in the streets because we're all going to be killed. Look, if these people wanted to kill us, if that was their mission, we'd be gone. So clearly that's not what their mission is, and it's not. They consider us part of the interstellar community, right? But we're low on the evolutionary chain. We are not that well. Emotional intelligence, we're just not there. I mean, I'm sorry to say, as wonderful as we think we are as a species, we got a long way to go. The evidence is not just here in our country right now, but racism, misogyny, greed, power, the oil cartels. This is not the way we should be doing business on this planet. Every one of us, we have red blood, right? We're all Homo sapiens, and they're disappointed in us, quite frankly. And we have some work to do. We're destroying our planet. I mean, let's just be honest. We have too many people. Nobody wants to talk about that problem, but all the other problems that we have are a function of too many people. And, correcting the problem isn't about killing people. It's about getting things under control and being responsible stewards of this planet. And this all, is part of this question, because they live here too. And, The other thing that I'm aware of is that, you know, we all have the ability to intellectually in our brains communicate with these people, telepathically. That's how they operate their ships. That's how they communicate. And we can do it too. We have to want to do it. And, you know, what we have to do as a species is to realize that we need to clean up our act first and foremost. We need to realize that it's not just us on this planet. There's a whole, you know, solar system out there, a whole galaxy, and we're just one part of it. And we can do better. And so that's kind of the basic message. And if we don't, we're going to have more problems. And if we do, I think the future is really bright. And I'll tell you what, you know, it's not very often that you get an opportunity to be part of something that's bigger than yourself, right? And, you know, I've been very fortunate to be involved in things like the runestone and these other out of place artifacts, and to have a TV show, you know, for as long as we did to help get what I consider to be the truth out there, right? And, you know, I take a lot of pride but it's a big responsibility. And now to be tapped, to be involved in this disclosure project, it's a big honor, and I take it very seriously. Now, at the same time, I got to make sure that things are what they purport to be. And if I'm compelled and convinced, and I conclude that this is what it is, then I'll be more than happy to be a spokesperson if that's what they want. And I can tell you so far, I am compelled. What I've seen so far has convinced me. And I think if people were honest with themselves, they know that what I've said is true, that we do need to get our act together, not just as Americans, but as humans on this planet.
Now, I'm assuming he kind of chose you because of who you are, your stature, you know, your integrity, and your, you know, I guess credibility, and to come out with some of this information. Now, I guess I'm assuming you did your own vetting of this person yourself, right?
Well, he spent 3 days at my house. We drank bourbon late into the night, and you know, he showed me his credentials, and we had some pretty heavy talks. And I'll tell you what, he's a good dude. You'd like him. He's younger than me, and he was chosen to be part of this project. And you know, one of the things that he told me was really prophetic, and that was, you know, the government has only made a decision in the last 3 years to be open about this ET question. And if anybody's paying attention, you're seeing more and more and more information coming out, right? From the government, from the military. And one of the things that he said was, you know, for over 80 years, they have had a policy of nobody, you know, nobody says a word. Anybody that leaks, you could potentially be killed. Deny things that happen to people, you know, ruin their reputations to preserve, you know, the secrecy for, you know, for our own good, right? I mean, all that did was to sow doubt and distrust within these branches of our government, right? And in the last 3 years, since they have come out and said, you know what, they're real, they're here. We're being honest with you. It has completely changed the vast majority of people's opinion about these agencies in a positive way. And I stopped and I thought about that, and I go, you know what, he's right. And so, you know, the one thing I'll say is, you know, when you get bad news about something or something that's scary or depressing, you know, you're really devastated at the moment. But what do we do as humans? You know, eventually you stop crying, you dust yourself off, and you keep going. That's just how we are. That's what you have to do. And sure, some people are going to be shocked. Some people are going to go, well, that can't be. But eventually they still have to go to their jobs. They got to take care of their kids. They got to, you got to get on with life. And that will happen here too. People are going to be curious. They're going to want to know more things, and that will come. But more than anything, people not only have to recognize that they're here, but they also have to recognize the issues that we have that are really more important than the fact that there's ETs here and out there, right? We got a serious problem in front of us, and that's taking care of our home. We don't have anywhere else to go, right? They do. We don't. So I don't know how anybody can argue with that logic. It makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and that's basically, you think, wow, they're having the slow rollout through the mainstream media, through some military sources, that yes, these things do exist, and they're just kind of trying to slowly prepare us for an eventual future where we'll be having regular contact with these beings if we can get our shit together, basically.
Well, 100%. My understanding is that we already have contact. We've had contact with them. We're working with them. Our government has treaties already. I mean, the world has treaties, not just us. The other governments are aware of this too. Recently, in Israel, a retired Israeli
I saw the story about the
officer came out, and he was a little more dire in his warning. He said, "We're not ready. We're in trouble. We are horribly off track," and they are disappointed. That's basically the same message I got. But this person we call Holden, he's also very passionate about this. He's not just a guy in a black suit and telling me here's the deal. He's got his own challenges in life, and he said, this is a really important project. And he says, there are days I get discouraged that I don't think that this is, we're going to be able to pull this off. And, he was very forthcoming. And so I told him, I said, you know what, dude, I said, I'm optimistic. I've seen a lot of the good that people can be when we try. And I said, we got to try. And so I'm in. So I told him, so I'm in.
Yeah, man, we definitely live in fascinating times right now, and I really hope that us humans can get our shit together so where we can get to that point, because I recently had my very first, what you would call, a contact experience.
Really?
Yes, I've been extremely skeptical doing the show the whole time until I had my own experience, which kind of confirmed things for me. But yeah, I got the same message that we really need to get our shit together before they can make their presence known.
Well, and I had an experience too. I encountered a person that I thought was just a person, and after one of the most profound moments in my life, with regard to my research at the Newport Tower, I'm talking about a defining moment in my life. This person was there, and the only person that was there for almost an hour, and that never happens at the tower. It just never happens. And she disappeared. And I'm like, the hell? It stuck in my craw for a long time because nobody could have done that. And her dog too. She had a dog with her, and they both just vanished. Holden says maybe it was one of them. And he said it in a way, it was one of them, because I described her and I told him exactly what happened, and he kind of chuckled and
yeah, from everything I've heard from so many different independent resources, authors, researchers, whistleblowers, that they walk amongst us and they look like us, and you wouldn't be able to tell if
that's right,
they're one of them.
Yep, that's right. And what I was told is that the aliens that everybody thinks of with the big heads and the almond-shaped eyes and the little noses, those are biological drones. Those are not the aliens.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, they walk among us. And I'll tell you what, this woman was gorgeous. I mean, I remember her being beautiful. And, I was on the inside of the tower. She was on the outside. We were literally 2 feet away from each other, right? And she was there the whole time when this illumination event happened, which for me was a moment of validation of all the research I had done, not just on the runestone, but the Templars and the Tower of Certainly and many other parts to this story. And I knew at that moment I was on the right track. I mean, it was amazing. And she was there for it. And I remember when I got like the money shot picture of the illumination, she said to me, I work in public relations. Would you like me to get a picture of you with that in the background? And I said, oh, that's a great idea. And I pulled out a backup camera I had in my jacket and I gave it to her and she snapped this picture and she gave me the camera back and I said, thanks. And I had been taking pictures every minute or so, watching this light box move towards the egg. And I wanted to get pictures going off. So I took the camera, I said, thanks, and I'd been doing it in front of her. I didn't even say anything. I turned, took a picture and I turned back and she was gone. I mean, 2 seconds. Looked in that park and there's not a lot in that park. She couldn't have just run off. And I remember when I turned around, my first thought was, well, that was rude. I thought we were getting along, And then all of a sudden the cold chill went down my back and I'm like, what just happened,
Right.
The funny part is, I told the story. I didn't tell the story for a long time because I didn't know what to say. I'm like, how do I explain it, right? And I remember somebody asked me, they said, well, did you ever develop those pictures? I said, well, yeah, I did. I didn't develop it. They were digital, but check this out. Oh, shoot. Of course, when I need it, I can't find it, but on the back,
no worries.
On the back of my Hooked X book, the author's picture is that picture. But there's no photo credit because I don't know who to credit.
Wow.
There it is.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Scott,
Yeah,
thank you so much, man. That was fascinating stuff. Man, we have so
I
much
got a
more-
million. I got a million of them, Chris. Let me tell you.
That's why you're gonna have you back on sometime soon. We got so much more we could have talked about. Before you head out, though, for those that are interested, do you have anything interesting upcoming? And if they're interested in finding out more about your work, where can they do so?
Sure. Well, do we have anything more interesting coming up? Oh, hell yes. I mean, my God, we still have all kinds of stuff going with the Templar research. We've got, the Texas Stones. There's, we have some treasure hunts we're going to be going on. We're looking at probably launching our own platform here in the near future. We got so much great stuff that's coming in this vein that, rewrites the history of America. But rewriting the history isn't really right. It's getting it right is what we're doing. It's the right story. But, I've written a lot of books on this subject matter. And if people want to read any of my books, if you want a signed copy of my book, just go to www.hookedx.com. That's HOOKEDX.com. I sign all books bought off the website. You can go to my blog, which is Scott Wolter Answers. If you want to ask me a question, I've got, every episode we ever did of America on Earth, I did a blog for. I have a lot of other blogs that I've written, and I respond to every inquiry. Unless it's really dumb, I won't post it. But you got to try pretty hard for me not to post it. Hopefully we'll be getting back out there on the lecture circuit here before too long. I do give a lot of lectures. I speak at a lot of Masonic events, but, I always tell the brothers, look, there's nothing that I'm going to be telling you that the public can't hear. So I encourage them to open it up to the public so people can come in and see the lodges and meet the brothers. And if there's guys that are interested, I think the world could use more Masons, quite frankly, and certainly in government. I can absolutely tell you for sure, if we had more Masons in government, we would have a higher probability of people making decisions in the interest of the greater good than the personal good. There's too much of that going on right now. And I think if we had more Masons, admittedly biased, but I do think that that would probably be better for us. Look, Masons founded our nation, and people brag about it all the time. So there must be something good about it, right?
Right. Well, Scott, thank you so much again for coming on tonight, and I'd love to have you back on in the future.
Okay. Hey, Chris, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. We'll do it again soon.
Definitely. Until next time, everyone else, have an excellent evening.